Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sir Hunt on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, here in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 11th of February 2025. And I'm going to get right down to it because today belongs to one event, one topic, one athlete only. It was 35 years ago today. The world bared witness to was probably the greatest upset, not just in boxing history, but potentially in sports history. We consider everything that took place on that night in Tokyo, Japan. It was, of course, James Buster Douglas doing the unimaginable and unthinkable, flying to Japan as a 42-1 underdog. 3 weeks and 2 days after the passing of his mother, shocking the world by knocking out Mike Tyson in the 10th round to win the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world, at a time when everybody thought Mike Tyson was the so-called immovable object, invincible force, whatever you want to call it. James Buster Douglas just flat out broke, beat down, destroyed, and punked Mike Tyson from start to finish. And the show is going to basically devote time to him, the fight, the event, and all this, and how that stacks up amongst all the all-time great sports upsets. Going into this fight, nobody knew what to make of the fight actually being made, simply because James Buster Douglas was basically a sort of an unknown figure, but more like known as a fighter who basically you could say had the gifts to be something good, but never put it together consistently enough to get to that level. And basically going against a Mike Tyson who, was 37-0, the heavyweight champion, just rolling through everybody. Many thought he was going to be thought Buster Douglas was going to be another name on Mike Tyson's resume, and people thought that Mike Tyson was going to roll him into a potential summer of '90 rumored showdown with Evander Holyfield, the fight everybody wanted to see at the time. But then again, no one told James Buster Douglas all of this because James Buster Douglas was busy preparing for the fight. We know the story of Mike Tyson in his career, the undisputed championship, made many successful title defenses. In and out of the ring chronicles have been well documented. So, but with Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson had the championships and a lot of things going for him. One thing Buster Douglas had was a championship boxing pedigree. We consider he had family members that was a part of the boxing fraternity, especially his father, Billy Dynamite Douglas, who was a pretty respectable fighter in the middleweight and light heavyweight classes from the 60s to the 70s, but never got to the opportunity that James Buster Douglas was about to get. He took Buster Douglas into his gym, pushed him hard so he can get to this point, the opportunities that Billy Douglas himself, didn't get. And basically, this was going to be James Buster Douglas's shot to make history, however far-fetched it was. And I say that because the Vegas bookmakers going the Vegas bookmakers going into this fight didn't even have a real set odds on this fight, simply because nobody wanted to bet on it. People were planning for another 90-second run over by Mike Tyson, like he did to Michael Spinks and Carl Williams the previous 2 years before, respectively, in 88 and 89. So they just threw a number out there, the equivalent of 42-1, just largely because when it got to that number, apparently that was the time someone made a bet on the fight. And basically, that was where the odds were set. But in reality, 42-1 was basically close, because you could probably see it was like 1 billion to 1 or even 1 trillion to 1, simply because that's how lopsided of a fight this was supposed to be on paper. I mean, what you expect? James Buster Douglas, really, before this, he was known for a fight against Tony Tucker when he fought for a belt, had the fight under control, but lost it because he gassed out and Tucker just pummeled him in the 10th round and the fight was stopped. Many thought he would be pummeled the same way by Tyson going into this fight in Tokyo. When he was signed for this fight, James Buster Douglas prepared himself better than ever, knowing this was his opportunity for an upset. Trained harder than he ever had trained before, got himself down to 230 pounds, which is the best condition he's been in. Had all the natural gifts to be a very good fighter. We consider the fact that he was 6'4", 230 pounds with an 82-inch reach, and had a very, very stiff jab in the heavyweight division, which is a big deal because when you had that, you were going to go places. Problem was, as I said, Buster Douglas couldn't put it together throughout his entire career. But in signing for this opportunity, he would have a shot at becoming the champion. Of course, the tragedy struck him 3 weeks before the fight when his mother, Lula Pearl, passed away of a stroke. I think her age was somewhere in the mid-40s. Can't remember the exact age off the top of my head. And of course, the Douglas camp offered Buster Douglas to postpone the fight. And Buster Douglas refused to postpone it because he used it as a motivational tool to get himself ready, to get himself prepared, to get himself motivated and ready to go for what's going to be the biggest highlight of his career. We consider him going against the so-called baddest man on the planet, the so-called irresistible force and the immovable object. And we consider he was flying from Columbus, Ohio to Tokyo, Japan with a nothing to lose attitude after his mom passed. You had a feeling he was going to be loose. And basically, as he flew to Tokyo, in all of the pre-fight buildup, you can sense how loose Buster Douglas was going in. Now, of course, there's all the hoopla with Mike Tyson. It's been well chronicled. You know, the partying, yada, yada, yada. Of course, there was a sparring video where he sparred with former world champ Greg Page, where he was floored in the sparring session. That went viral all over the place, especially it went viral during the HBO telecast of this fight. And maybe you could have seen some signs were there, but maybe not like what we were about to see. Simply because Mike Tyson started to get caught up in the lifestyle, which was well chronicled. Of course, being promoted by Don King will do that to you. And he was staring at a somewhat of a $25 to $30 million payday against Evander Holyfield in the summer of 1990 had Mike Tyson taking care of business. That's why they fight the fights. So we're going to fast forward to the fight a little bit. I'll divulge into this. You know, Buster Douglas is going into the ring very loose, you know, basically bouncing up and down the ring. You would think the guy was just going to walk in to be a victim of Mike Tyson's wrath, which demoralized the previous 37 opponents going in. Didn't happen. He was coming in real loose. He enters the ring with his just takes off his robe, just really moving loosely, rather nicely, relaxed, just calm and easy and ready to go with his mind totally clear, focused on the task in hand. As Mike Tyson gets ready to enter the ring, of course, the customary pounding the walls in the locker room, as mentioned by Jim Lampley of HBO. It was later confirmed by members of Buster Douglas's management team who watched Mike Tyson glove up. And as he was entering the ring, he's trying to get Buster Douglas into the stare down to try to lure Douglas into an intimidation factor, which Douglas did not oblige in. And that was, what Mike Tyson's number one strength was his ability to intimidate you and scare you to thinking you're going to be fighting the real baddest man on the planet. Buster Douglas was not going to be intimidated. I mean, he basically came in with a nothing to lose attitude. And basically in the stare downs, you can see that Buster Douglas just didn't allow himself to get caught up in the Mike Tyson aura, or whatever the hell Tyson fans want to call it, and basically allowed himself to be relaxed, be calm, and ready to go. And basically, when the first round sounded, the first telling thing you realized was that Buster Douglas wasn't going to let Mike Tyson get inside and do what Mike Tyson does best. Douglas started to use his reach, use his boxing ability, his natural gifts to keep Tyson on the outside, and that's what happened. Because because you going through that first round, you're still waiting for that Mike Tyson explosion, the body shot uppercut that has been known to pin fighters on the ropes and put them down. Buster Douglas never even gave him a chance to even do that in the opening round. I mean, there was even no signs of body punching, no head movement. His timing, which been the Mike Tyson formula for success, was not even there. And Buster Douglas has timed him perfectly from the first round, the entire first round, with the 1-2s, and of course he wins the round big. So we now fast forward in the second round. This is where we're going to start to see some signs here a little bit, because not only does Douglas continue on, he starts adding hooks and uppercuts. And I have a comment here. Big up to you too, my guy. Hope you're doing good over there. we go in the second round. Not only is he throwing jabs and hooks, he's throwing uppercuts now, and he's pinning Tyson on the ropes. Usually, as you're throwing, Tyson's finding a way to counter you. And Buster Douglas has Mike Tyson pinned on the ropes on the defensive, which is something I never thought or even anyone could even imagine. And basically, from the second round to the fourth round, those 1-2s of Buster Douglas using his reach started to do some damage, because in the fourth round, that left eye of Mike Tyson basically swelled to the size of a golf ball, and all of a sudden, you have Mike Tyson's corner so unprepared to fix this thing. They tried this weird tactic of putting ice water in a latex glove when they should have had something called an inswell, which is what's used for minimizing swellings in boxing matches. And that's where you know trouble was lurking. Because as the eye was getting bigger, Buster Douglas's performance was getting better. Because those 1-2s he was landing throughout the fight, he was landing them more and more with each passing minute, with each passing second, and that eye kept getting worse and worse and worse. Basically, by the sixth round, Tyson was virtually a one-eye fighter. And Douglas is basically just fighting the perfect fight, the fight that fighters try to fight against Mike Tyson but couldn't get done because for whatever reason. Maybe the biggest reason here was Buster Douglas saw the flaws of Mike Tyson and it wasn't going to be intimidated. And that was probably it. So you're talking about the first 6 rounds of this fight. In my opinion, Douglas won all 6 rounds, despite what the official judges said. And you talk about just the peppering the jab, the right hand. Every time Tyson tried to get inside, Douglas would tie him up and not let Mike get off. And on the inside, sometimes he'll sneak an uppercut in there and a left hook. And as the fight was wearing on, the punishment was starting to show as the 1-2s were starting to keep Tyson from coming inside one at all, because it was basically like target practice for most of this fight. Now we're going to fast forward a bit to round 8, which is the only time that Mike Tyson and his fans had any glimmer of hope, and basically looked like maybe, because in this role of, the upset king, James Buster Douglas started to admire his work a little bit, started to get a little too comfortable. And in exchange, after he pins Mike Tyson against the ropes, Tyson comes out, sneaks a right-hand uppercut, and puts Douglas on the canvas. And of course, we have this controversy here where Douglas supposedly was out when he wasn't. Basically, the referee Octavio Mayron's counting out Douglas on the 6, 7, 8, 9. He gets up at 9. And of course, all the Tyson fans are up in a bunch all the time, 35 years later with wrinkled faces and gray beards, saying he was robbed when all the replays showed Douglas was up at the count of 9, the only count that matters. But that moment that looked like Buster Douglas was going to lose, he gathers himself, beats the count, goes back to the corner. And it's like he gets up as if it didn't even bother him. Even Douglas said it was a good punch, but it was more of a glancing punch. Because if you look at the replay, the uppercut hit him more on the cheek than on the chin. Because if it hit him on the chin, the way Tyson lands the uppercut, Douglas is out on the canvas. So it's a good thing for Buster Douglas to get on the canvas. And he said he wanted to stay on the canvas simply because he wanted to gather himself. Because when a fighter's on the canvas, sometimes you're taught to take the extra second or two to get yourself together. Now, James Buster Douglas said countless times he could have gotten up earlier if he wanted to, because he was alert at the referee Octavio Mayron's count. He got up at the count of 9, goes back into his corner. We fast forward into round 9, and like round 8 never happened, because Buster Douglas comes out, starts to lay a beating on Mike Tyson. Left-right combination. Tyson wobbles into the corner. Douglas is wailing away with body shots and hooks, and Mike Tyson is now on the ropes, just hanging on. The image of Mike Tyson hanging on the ropes and a guy on him, pummeling him, was something unimaginable and unforeseen and lasts on everybody's mind. And I say this simply because people thought we're going to be having another 90-second wipeout. And then comes the unthinkable, which turned into the reality in round 10. The jabs that set up Tyson. Tyson tries to come in. The perfectly placed uppercut by Douglas. The combination. Down goes Tyson with his mouthpiece out. And perhaps the most polarizing image of that particular fight, which was on a Sports Illustrated cover weeks after the fight, was Mike Tyson on all fours, looking for his mouthpiece, putting the mouthpiece in his mouth before he got up, which was the biggest mistake, because when he got up, the count hit 10 and it was basically over. Because in fairness, if Mike Tyson gotten up without the mouthpiece, the ref would have been forced to take a timeout and force Mike Tyson's corner to put the mouthpiece back in. Mike Tyson said himself he thought crazy they weren't going to let him fight without his mouthpiece, so that's why he went searching for his mouthpiece. And he was hazy after the fight. And so there it was, February 11th, 1990, 35 years ago today in Tokyo, Japan. The shocker everyone did not see coming. Nobody did, unless you're James Buster Douglas and his people. James Buster Douglas did the unthinkable. Just the words, James Buster Douglas, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Just something that never would resonate in anybody's mind after that fight. Because a lot happened on that night. We'll start with the easiest part. Mike Tyson didn't know what happened. His trainer, Aaron Snow, told him to his ear. It was caught on camera on the HBO telecast version of it. He was knocked out. He didn't even know. He literally had to be helped to his corner because he was gone. And you see as he was turning around looking away, the damage that was done to Mike Tyson's eye, was just swollen the size of a golf ball, was absolutely unforeseen, something no one could see coming. And after the win, Buster Douglas, after losing his mom in the interview with Larry Merchant, dedicated the fight to his mom, and of course broke down emotionally. And he dedicated not just to his mom, but to his father, who pushed him to get to this point, because his father, Billy Douglas, who was a fighter himself, never got the opportunity that Buster Douglas got. He wanted Buster Douglas to get this opportunity, and he made the most of it. And he thanked both of them and basically set it up, chopped him, till he falls, and he was flat on his, you know what? That's exactly what he did. And basically, you couldn't take it away from Buster Douglas, even though Don King tried it. A protest was filed on behalf of Mike Tyson by Don King when they tried to say that when Douglas went down, the ref should have counted 10 and rewarded Mike Tyson to win. He actually tried to overturn the result. Flat out overturn it in Mike Tyson's favor. Actually, there's the image after the fight where they kept running the replay with Don King, Mike Tyson, John Horn, and Rory Holloway. They kept counting 9, 10, 11, etc. Problem was, the referee's count was what mattered in the end, and Octavio Mayron's count stood. It was legit. The referee and the timekeeper will never be on the same page when it comes to the 10 count. It's always going to be the referee's discretion that mattered, because that's what it was. And at the end of the day, Buster Douglas beat the count, and the rest is history. Eventually, Don King wound up going away with the protest. The governing bodies tried all they could to discredit the win by not declaring Douglas their official champ until this protest was done. Of course, one of the other ones decided to do some wild things with the belt. I don't know what it was. But after all of that, they finally gave Buster Douglas his due after hell and high water, because after the fight, they did everything they could to take away the joy and the thrill of Buster Douglas's landmark moment, that being Mike Tyson and Don King. And it just looked bad on them at the end of the day. That's Don King boxing for you. For my fight followers, you know what Don King boxing was all about. Now we talk about what happened weeks after the fight. They try to get a rematch with Douglas, being Mike Tyson. Evander Holyfield was the mandatory challenger. And it turns out Holyfield activated the mandatory clause. So Holyfield and Douglas had to go at it next. And of course, Don King and Buster Douglas continued their hot dispute. And I guess a member of the Mirage, who hosted the Douglas Holyfield fight, decided to, get involved and pay Buster Douglas several $1 million to settle with Don King to keep him out of it, which is what happened. And we know what the story of that one is, because Buster Douglas tried to get a rematch with Tyson. And this is a reminder to all you Tyson fans out there. Evander Holyfield was the mandatory contender for the title. It was his right to the title before Mike Tyson's was, because there was no rematch clause, because Mike Tyson had his butt handed to him. He wasn't going to get an immediate rematch. No way. Simply because Evander Holyfield had the call. His goal all along was to be the heavyweight champion of the world. When he was an undisputed #1 contender, he had a call to it, and he took advantage of it. And the captivation of that was October 25th, 1990, when Holyfield knocked out Douglas to win the title in the 3rd round. And after that fight, Buster Douglas's, career in life sort of hit a downward spiral, got into a diabetic coma, ballooned over to 400 pounds, and almost died. Was forced to come back back in the mid to late 90s. Got a couple of nice wins until he lost to Lou Savarese in 1998, which he was looking at a title shot eventually against Lennox Lewis at some point, because he found himself in the rankings again a little bit. But after the Lou Savarese loss, that was all she wrote for Buster Douglas. But of course, for Mike Tyson, we know the story here. It's former fights, prison for being found guilty of rape. He wasn't plead guilty, found guilty of rape. And basically just came back as a character, nothing more, nothing less. All he was in it for was the dollars, even by his own admission. He said it after he lost to Kevin McBride in 2005. His career was done in the Douglas fight. I mean, basically, everything was there. The blueprint to fight and beat Mike Tyson was done by James Buster Douglas to mere perfection that night. Basically, just don't let the guy intimidate you. Anything you wanted to do to Tyson, Douglas showed it. Fighters tried it, but didn't put it together the way he did that night. And basically, what Douglas did, you're talking about the 35-year history of arguably the greatest upset, not just in boxing history, but maybe in sports history, took place in Tokyo, Japan. Again, for you American fight fans out here who yap about where fights take place, Mike Tyson's from Catskill, New York. Buster Douglas was from Columbus, Ohio. Where did this fight take place? Not in America, Tokyo, Japan. Now, of course, there's some conspiracy theories as to why the fight took place over there, because people here got tired of Mike Tyson's one-round knockouts, yada, yada, yada. And I guess Don King wanted to take the show on the road. But we know what happened. One of the biggest backfires, because at the time, it cost Mike Tyson a $30 million paycheck to fight Evander Holyfield 4 months later. And actually, Evander Holyfield saw a $12 million paycheck go down the tubes. That was announced by the people at HBO with Larry Merchant. But it was 35 years ago today. When you think about this fight, you think about all the colossal upsets, you're talking about this one probably being among the very top. I mean, think about it for a second. Who did not, how many people legit think out there, excluding Buster Douglas and his camp, how many people legit think James Buster Douglas was going to do this? I didn't. Because I said on a recording the other day, when I was watching this fight, I still was waiting and waiting and waiting for that one moment where Mike Tyson just explodes and just ends it in the snap of his fingers. You're just wondering to yourself, what's going on here? I mean, Mike Tyson, was getting just, pummeled and pummeled and pummeled until, of course, the uppercut that floored him in the 8th round. But even then, you just wondered, something was missing with him that night, or is Buster Douglas is that damn good that night? I think maybe everyone out here, especially in the boxing community, who's been guilty of this for 35 years, might be time to give Buster Douglas his due. Think about what this man had to go through for a minute. I mean, he lost a fight a couple years before to Tony Tucker, and people call him a dog as a guy who basically checks out and quits. Fights obscure undercard fights that, no one knows who he's even still fighting. I mean, beat a couple of respectable fighters like Trevor Burbick and Whippy Holstead. Goes through the death of his mother 23 days before the fight. Also has the mother of his child in some kind of a kidney ailment. I believe that was reported by Tim May of the Columbus Dispatch. And for him to gather all of that together, to do this on this night, excluding the time he was floored, the guy was driven and motivated to come out on top. I mean, Mike Tyson did not fight himself that night. He fought James Buster Douglas. A lot of you guys in the community have given Mike Tyson the most giant pass for 3.5 decades when it comes to this fight, saying this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Let's start with this. If he didn't train, like you guys say he didn't train, Douglas whacks him out in less than 4 rounds because Douglas was on him like a hot knife through butter. No way Tyson makes it through the 10th round, and no way the 8th round knockdown happens. No way. Let's get that out of the way. This ideology about Mike Tyson should have been given the first call to a rematch. Evander Holyfield was the #1 contender. He had the first call to the title shot before Mike Tyson did. So he had the right before Mike Tyson. Tyson had to wait in line. That was something that killed Mike Tyson fans, Don King, John Horn, and Rory Holloway for the longest time. This ideology about the long count, Octavio Miron's count matters in the end. That's all that matters. Yes, Mike Tyson lived a crazy lifestyle outside the ring. It caught up to him on this day. Maybe we should have seen it coming. Maybe we didn't. But let's not act like the guy that beat him that night was basically going through nothing, because he went through a real life crisis, finding out his mother, his own biological mother, was dead 3 weeks in the middle of training for the biggest fight of his life. And for him to go through with this, wow, knowing his mother died in the middle of his training camp, the guy needs to be given much, much, much more credit than everyone in the boxing community has given him from the time the fight happened to now. Because 90% of you guys haven't. You guys still make excuses for Mike Tyson, which makes you guys a bunch of phonies, period. Mike Tyson lost because James Buster Douglas was a better fighter. Mike Tyson lost because James Buster Douglas was prepared to win. Mike Tyson lost because he fought James Buster Douglas. That's all. Don't blame Don King. Don't blame Robin Givens. Don't blame his management team. Don't blame the referee's count. Blame Buster Douglas because he wanted to go out there and become the heavyweight champion of the world and win the fight for his mom, who died 23 days before the fight. That's who the credit should be given to. You might as well just start now, because you guys have given Mike Tyson a giant pass. All the Tyson fans, all the Tyson fanboys, all the people who have Mike Tyson on their profile pics and their avatars on Facebook and X. Congratulations. You're degrading. To discredit a man who basically went into this fight with a heavy heart, losing his mom 3 days before the fight, and refusing to give him credit, this says a lot about you at the end of the day. But it was a terrific moment, whatever it is. Making excuses all you want. Results official. James Buster Douglas, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, 35 years ago today in Tokyo, Japan. I'll always give Douglas his credit, because he deserves it more than anybody else, because I can't imagine someone going through a life crisis and pulling this one off. They said the odds were 42-1. I think it was probably more than that. But I probably think it's like 3 million to 1. We're going to see anything remotely close to this ever again, because that's just how surreally one-sided, at least on the odds makers, this fight ever was. People just need to start giving Buster Douglas his due a little bit, because he was the one that busted Mike Tyson's face, put him on the canvas, knocked his mouthpiece out, and was the one that had his hands in the hand raised in the end. Wasn't Mike Tyson. Now you talk about some of the sports upsets where this stacks up to. I can go to a whole laundry list if I really want to. I mean, I'm just going to pinpoint some of the ones that fresh off the top of my head. Maybe the biggest one close to it was, of course, the story of this one, the Miracle on Ice, the 1980 Winter Olympics, Lake Placid, New York. The U.S. hockey team shocking the power Soviet Union, the 4-time who won, I think, 4 gold medals previously, 5 of the last 6. U.S. wins it 4-3. Of course, known for Al Michaels' famous quote, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. That definitely is probably right there with it, with Tyson and Douglas. To me, that's 1A and 1B. Flip-flop those, it doesn't matter. Of course, Super Bowl III, the guarantee by Joe Namath, when the New York Jets shocked the Baltimore Colts 16-7. They were 19-point underdogs going into this game. And the biggest thing, this was a blow to all what they wanted to do in the AFL. And of course, the thing is, it started the NFL merger back when this time happened. You could forget the if you talk about college sports, probably more so with this than professional sports. How about the 1983 NCAA title game between NC State and Houston? Back then, it was the Houston Cougars, known as Five Slamma Jamma, with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. For you newbies out here, back then, Olajuwon and Drexler was like the Kobe and Shaq of college basketball. I mean, the premier guard center tandem at the time. NC State found a way to win that game. They were down big at halftime, came back, took control, and got a back-and-forth battle until a haymaker 30-foot three-pointer was missed, and then Lorenzo Charles got in a put-back buzzer-beating dunk off the offensive miss to pull the upset for NC State, who was a 7.5-point underdog to Houston. Of course, you guys know that game for the late Jim Valvano, where he's just wandering around looking for someone to hug. Yeah, that was an historical upset. Go to 2 years later, Villanova over Georgetown. It was known as the perfect upset because Villanova shot the cover off the ball against Patrick Ewing and the almighty Georgetown Hoyas, and especially in the second half, where I think there's some ridiculous percentage. At one point, they were 9 for 10, being Villanova, and of course, Villanova was a near 10-point underdog going into that game. What's crazy is they went in the tournament as an 8 seed, and they weren't even ranked in any of the preseason polls. That's an upset worth talking about. Of course, maybe in the NBA, who could forget this one? The 1994 NBA playoffs, the Denver Nuggets coming from down 2-0 to shock the number 1 seed Seattle Sonics. I mean, the first 2 games in that series, Seattle was about to run Denver out. I mean, they were fixing to sweep Denver. Then Denver just gradually just plucked till they got to Game 5 in Seattle, where Dikembe Mutombo had a defensive stand and got the rebound. And you saw the image, of course, with him holding the ball on the floor, screaming in joy. Of course, who could forget that one? The 1994 NBA playoffs. The first time ever when the number 8 seed shocked the number 1. I think Seattle ran wild on the NBA. I think they won like 65 games during the regular season. Looked like they were just going to roll through the Western Conference. Denver had other plans to come from down 0-2 and to reverse sweep the 1 seed and eliminate them. Was a historic upset. Probably the biggest one in NBA history, in my opinion. If you're talking about NBA, how about the 2011 NBA Finals? The Mavericks and the Heat. Heat, the overwhelming favorites. Of course, the big 3, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. Against Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavs. I don't even know who the heck Dallas' second best player on the team was. And they found a way to shock Miami and basically get their 1 championship, which carries a lot of weight given what the franchise has gone through in its history at the time. I mean, that's a shocker. Basically, Dirk Nowitzki was just a one-man train wreck in that final series against Miami, especially games 4, 5, and 6 when nobody had an answer for Dirk. Of course, you could talk about something I never thought I would say. For you college bracket players out here, the 16 seed upsetting number 1 happened twice in the last 7 years. 2018, it was UBMC over Virginia in 2018. And in 2023, it was Farley Dickinson over Purdue. Again, no one ever dreamed of seeing a 16 upsetting a number 1 in college basketball. We had 2 instances of this over the past 7 years. And of course, the 1986 World Series is another one. The bad guys Mets beating the Boston Red Sox. Of course, the game's best remembered for the error by Bill Buckner, where he tried to field the ball from Mookie Wilson, goes in between his legs. And of course, it cursed him and the Red Sox for a long, long time. And of course, the Boston community for the longest time never forgave Bill Buckner till the latter stages of his life, which, there's a lot of reasons why they lost the game, but it wasn't game in series, but it wasn't because of Bill Buckner in that play. But yeah, that Mets team came out of nowhere to win that series. Of course, Super Bowl 42. You can remember this one. The Giants over the Patriots. Patriots drive for perfection. Eli Manning had other ideas. The play to David Tyree, that was basically sets up the game winner from him to Plaxico Burress. Stops the Patriots run to perfection. The first of 2 Super Bowls Eli Manning has on Tom Brady. We know the story of that in the NFL community. I could bring up a whole loads of upsets. Maybe the top 2 for my time, or maybe ever, in my opinion, still Buster Douglas over Mike Tyson and the Miracle on Ice. Flip-flop the 2, you can have it either way, because The situations in those two upsets stand out. I mean, when you think about upsets, I always think about those two. And when I think about February 11th, every year, I'll always call it James Buster Douglas Day because it always belongs to him for what he did 35 years ago in Tokyo, Japan, when he beat Mike Tyson to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, overcoming 42-1 odds, overcoming a heavy heart with the loss of his mom, and of course, an ailment to the mother of his child. And for him to pull the performance of a lifetime to fight a fight to mere perfection the way he did. And I should also close, before she passed, her mom told one of her best friends, Buster Douglas is going to beat Mike Tyson. She said that before she passed. One of her final words on this earth, she pretty much assured Buster Douglas was going to do it. Douglas was insistent he was going to shock the world. No, people didn't want to listen because for the obvious reasons. Maybe we all should have listened. Maybe in hindsight, maybe we all should start understanding something when we talk about this stuff. We talk about what goes on in an athlete's mind, what they're going through, because we have all you guys out here are so fixated on what you read on devices, what you watch on TVs, whatever. These men that go out there and perform on any sport, whatever it is, they're human beings just like all of us. And outside the glitz and glamour of what goes on in the sporting world and with the cameras, the lights, whatever, they have normal lives like we all do. A lot of you guys forget that when we try to give James. Let me back up. A lot of you guys forget this when you refuse to give James Buster Douglas his due. A lot of you guys do this and are 100% guilty of it. Might be time for you guys to start reconsidering your morals, reconsidering your values, and maybe reconsidering your approach, because these men, and I said women too, because the women's sports community is growing. They're human beings like all of us. They have lives outside of the sports and sports world. You know, put the phones, the lights, the cameras, the TVs away. They're just human beings like all of us. I would say this. Maybe we should have seen this coming 35 years ago. I get it. People were so fixated on the Mike Tyson phenomenon. People were. But given everything that Buster Douglas went through, given everything what Buster Douglas endured, and all the reputation he started to develop, and given the fact he was given an opportunity to make the most of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, maybe in hindsight, we should have seen this coming. He was ready for this moment. Probably the only person in this whole world that was. Maybe we all need to understand this a little bit more. Because I'll tell you this. Anybody that calls an event a shocker these days, I'm not shocked. Because I lived through this round for round, minute for minute, second for second, punch for punch. Nothing's going to top this as a shocker in my time, ever. I was way too young for the Miracle on Ice. I mean, way too young. I was like 2 years old when that happened. I give it its due because of the circumstances with the power that the Soviet Union was at the time. But it certainly was 35 years ago today. The world was introduced to James Buster Douglas Day for what he did in Tokyo, Japan, when he beat Mike Tyson to be the heavyweight champion of the world. And I say this respectively to everybody in the boxing community, everybody in the sports communities, respectively. Might be time to give James Buster Douglas his due, because he earned it and he deserved it. Took no shortcuts, took the hard way, did it the right way, worked his tail off, had a heavy heart going into this fight. I don't even want to guess how heavy it is. And pulled it off. Say what you want about Mike Tyson. Doesn't matter. James Buster Douglas was the one that made the history. Mike Tyson was his victim. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I hope everyone has themselves a wonderful rest of the 11th of February 2025. And I will be back here within the next couple of days. Until then, hope everyone takes care of themselves. And as always, 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 make self-care your number one priority. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Take care of yourself first before you take care of everyone and everything else. Take care, good night, and God bless.